Whispering Woods is rescuing one more desert animal, and that's the sand cat. Genevieve Joyce knows this is a highly requested species, and Omari Achebe at Namibia's Wildlife Shelter has a sand cat in need of rehabilitation. Multiple, in fact. In the absence of Wesley Parsons, who is away at school, Imogen Chen is ready to take the cat in, and Arthur Joyce is already looking into ways to highlight it. To everyone's dismay, SylvaCorp International is pushing their projects forward and shutting down anyone pushing back against them. With Sylvester Kane's expansion into Africa, the Namibia Wildlife Shelter is forced to close. The haven is also hit hard when Genevieve and Arthur discover that their eldest brother, Tristan Joyce, is a shareholder in SylvaCorp. Even worse, their other brother, Xander Joyce, works directly for Sylvester Kane as his assistant. Is there any way to redeem this relationship? Welcome back to Whispering Woods Wildlife Haven. Hey everyone, Sparrow here. We're having a bit of an extra episode today, so thanks for tuning in, whether it's for the first time or the 100th time. If you saw last week's episode where we finished up the desert house, you may have also seen the surprise animal that ended up filling a small gap between habitats, and that was the prairie dog. But what you probably didn't know is that I actually asked a few people which animal they would like to see there, and the votes were pretty split between prairie dogs and sand cats. So I decided that the sand cat would get its very own habitat right behind the desert house to help us transition to the next portion of the zoo and also get rid of this really big field behind the building. My initial idea was to set up a sort of palace for the sand cat, leaning into some Persian or Egyptian architecture with this build. But I eventually found a more modern enclosure online that I wanted to take bits and pieces from, so this blocky, castle-like structure will be disappearing momentarily. Instead, we'll be combining some wood elements with the temple stone to give the building a more modern feel. I made a curve with the painted rod pieces from the Australia pack, and then went to fill it in with wood pieces. Silly me, I thought the thin beams were the smallest piece in the Indonesian stained timber set, but it's actually the plank pieces. My bad, I was pretty sick while building this enclosure and my brain wasn't entirely there. But I did eventually figure that out, and the thinner planks helped fill in that rounded shape much more nicely. Now, if you know anything about me, I really suck at visualizing things when it comes to rotating on more than one plane at a time. So getting this shape rotated about 30 degrees to continue the sand cat house took way too long. I tried setting up this wall to get a better picture, seeing as the picture in my head was definitely not matching what was happening on my screen, but I'm not sure that helped at all. Still very much struggling with rotations even after spending an hour trying to figure it out. Back to the drawing board. I found having a straight edge at the back of this curved panel helped because I could rotate around it more easily, and this is where my new wall stemmed from. Using some more wood planks to create what will eventually be a little education portion before moving the wooden and metal elements over separately. This is another thing I've noticed with Planet Zoo. I have a much easier time translating one type of construction piece at a time versus the whole element, especially if it's not aligned to the grid. Even that meant I had to make some small corrections to make sure there were no pieces sticking out, but we finally got it together. Saving this wall that I had built in the previous rendition of the Sand Cat Castle, the next portion of the wall will feature a small window where guests can see the sand cat in a burrow. Not the in-game burrow, but one I'll be building myself later. For this purpose, we've got lots of plaster covered with more wood planks, as well as some metal beams to hold our glass window in. Flanked that with more curved panels once more, and we're moving on to this feature wall. Guests will be able to enter this part of the building for some indoor viewing, but I wanted to have quite a bit of light in there, seeing as the sand cat is another desert species and the desert has lots of light and heat throughout the year. We've got some big windows going up, through which you'll be able to see a small desert garden later, and more of our temple stone, plaster, and marquee beams to tie everything together. This is the last guest-facing wall that we really need to worry about, and I set up the other walls off camera before running my null barriers all the way around the building. Unfortunately though, this was not quite big enough for even a single sand cat, so I did have to expand it just a bit. Since this is a weird shape once more, I wanted to finish up the roof sooner rather than later just to get it out of the way, and I settled for a flat roof with these support beams running underneath it. We'll have some more skylights too, but the majority of the roof will be our trusty plastic rectangles recolored to a dark brown color. Decided I wasn't a fan of the flat skylights, so I went back in and created a bit of a slope. I kind of like how the windows are more reminiscent of pyramids now, and work better with that initial concept for the sandcat's home. To give our single sandcat a bit more space, I wanted to create something that looked like it had just been tacked on because, let's face it was tacked on, and use the New World murals for the walls and some of the corrugated sheets as the roof. This is where the in-game staff gate will be. To finish up the building, I ran a queue path through the guest area. Since the regular paths only go down to 4 meters and that was too wide for my liking, this trick allows me to place 2-meter paths, delete them, and replace that same width with a regular path instead. The building did look a bit strange just standing in the field behind the desert house, so I wanted to create a plaza for it. Tried a few different strategies before settling on concrete with some metal beams sunk into it. Thank you, Sheen Tide, for that suggestion, but as you can see, it definitely doesn't look great. No worries, this is why we use the magic of landscaping. First curbs, then some mulch, and finally foliage all around. What a difference. All of that work and we still haven't even started on the actual habitat. Here's that pretend burrow I promised. I built up a hill out of the mulch pieces, which again, not the best thing for my difficulties with rotating at multiple angles at once, but it did come together nicely. It also helps that we'll be covering it up with foliage, so it doesn't really matter if it looks terrible. Threw in a short retaining wall as well. This will help with structure, but also helps to block off the view to the other viewing window. And some more wooden elements for the doorway here, which I also used to line the interior of this burrow. It helped to hide some of the mulch imperfections and also helped make this area feel much more cozy. For other theming, I also wanted to use this fountain, so I hid the water tap behind it and covered it in tiles to make sure the sandcat actually drinks from it. One challenge of building in shorter buildings is that you can't use tall foliage. That's fine, we'll just use lots of rocks to help fill up the space. This corner I'm building up here hides some imperfections from the concrete plaza outside and will also be the location for the sandcat's in-game burrow piece. Across the way is a tall rock mound that will allow the sandcat to walk on top of the burrow we built, and also has the added benefit of blocking the view between the two viewing windows. With that, it was time for enrichment items, which are scattered about the entire enclosure. Then foliage. I've been loving sinking the quiver tree into the ground for a textured bush, lots of desert plants like century plants, aloe, and retusa bushes, as well as the ever-present drin grass. Oh, and faux rocks, obviously. The habitat didn't quite feel complete because of this empty wall here, and though sandcats aren't particularly great climbers, they do traverse fallen trees in the wild. This sort of platform can provide enrichment for them, especially in a zoo setting. So we're adding a bit of a catwalk along the wall to help fill up space and also give the sandcat some more traversable area. Just going to make sure that that's properly secured to the wall, and with a final check, we can see the sandcat can in fact access it. We're in the home stretch. Here is that portion of the wall we agonized over at the beginning of the episode, and I'm just adding some fun educational items to it. Bringing some color into the space with the tiled floor on the guest side of things, plus a planter that matches those outside the building to bring guests closer to the desert foliage they can see inside the sandcat's enclosure. Some more of these fun hanging pots I started using in the desert house last week. These are just the African beads recolored, and I think we're ready to enter the realm of the sandcat. What was once an empty field is now a beautiful exhibition for one of the world's smallest cats. Though the foliage all around still has you firmly in the rainy climate of England, all it takes is stepping up to the glass to see this animal's desert world. There are opportunities to learn about this elusive creature, and you can even see it resting in its burrow through a peek-through window. Next door, the small indoor viewing area provides more educational opportunities and a front row seat for some of the sandcat's absolutely adorable antics. From here, we can walk along the back of the zebra enclosures to find ourselves back at the village, with plenty more zoo to explore. If you've been enjoying my content, consider subscribing or even joining the channel with that button below. Here are our members now. With the completion of this desert area, here's an overhead shot of where the zoo is at. I think we have 1 or 2 more habitats before we call this season a wrap, but I definitely have much more in store for Whispering Woods. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.